Welcome to The Next Journey, the adventure travel podcast with me, Andrew St. Pierre White. I'm a prisoner of this. Welcome everybody to The Next Journey podcast. My special guest for the second time in Auckland, New Zealand is my close friend and school friend, Charles Bradfield. Hello, Charles.
Hi, Andrew.
I've invited Charles back because if you have not seen our previous podcast with Charles, we spoke about the fun we had when we were very young, 17, 18, 19, 20 years old, in building boats and sailing boats and eventually going our separate ways. And when it comes to adventure travel, we mentioned an event in Charles's life that I wanted to save because the story was extraordinary in itself. And I know life-changing for you. And this story is worth repeating. And I have heard over the past decade or so snippets of it. And I've invited Charles back so that I can actually understand the full impact of what happened. It was a good news story in that bad stuff happened and the family survived something that perhaps they shouldn't have. And I've invited Charles back to tell us this story. This podcast, I'd like to say thank you to our sponsors, Egon, the producers of specialist equipment that helps anybody building a four-wheel drive camper, trailer, caravan in your wiring systems and in your plumbing systems. All the hard bits done for you. Plug and play. So if you're building a four-wheel drive or camper caravan, then check out egon.com.au. It's going to save you not just money, but a huge amount of time and a huge amount of brain damage when trying to figure out your DC electrics or your plumbing systems. That's egon.com.au. Right, Charles, I don't really know where to begin.
No, I don't either, actually. I will share as part of the story some of the learning that happened, and believe it or not, even in traumatic events, there's a bit of humor that actually had us laughing in the face of great peril. And it's funny how those things happen. So very briefly, I can't remember where we got up to last time, but
I think start from as if we haven't spoken
about
it.
Initially, a 30-foot yacht, which we sailed around as a family of 8 and would spend a month on board and what have you. And we outgrew it. And we bought a 40-footer, a Chico. And the Chico I chose because this particular one was very pretty, well put together. Our Navy uses the same model vessel for training. They have a good race reputation. And I have planned to do an offshore trip with the family. There's a little bit which I'll introduce you to. When I bought the boat and it had a survey, some damage to the keel was found, and the previous owner admitted to hitting a reef. And that repair was paid for by his insurance, but in my ownership. And when it was at the boatyard, the foreman said to me, "It's a pity, Charles, but that insurance assessor, he's a bit hard." And I didn't pick up the hint because, in fact, the repair was inadequate and is part of the backstory of where things went wrong. So we sailed the boat and it was great. And then a crack had developed where the repair was. I contacted the boatyard and they said, "Oh, no, that little crack, it's not a problem. Is it pouring water or anything?" I said, "No, actually it isn't." I said, "I'm just warning you that I am going to race in the two-handed round North Island yacht race. And are you still telling me that this is all right?" And they said, "No, bring it in." And they did a repair. I thought all was well. And in fact, I raced that boat two-handed around the North Island. Matthew, I had asked, who was my 16-year-old son, wasn't allowed to go with me. The race organizers said the race was too dangerous. And I tell you what, racing around New Zealand, or this race, particular one, was the North Island race, because I subsequently did, with Matthew, the round New Zealand yacht race in yet another boat. But with this boat, with this Chico, I did with a friend, and it was a fantastic experience in seamanship for me, and it was part of my preparation for a first offshore trip with my family. I have sailed offshore before. I did a boat delivery to Australia on a boat that I had borrowed and looked after for a year, and then later took it with the owner to Brisbane. And we had used that boat for a year, and it's what got us into sailing in New Zealand and realizing that we really wanted to do this. So having completed the round North Island yacht race, we set a goal to go and take as much leave as I could, and all I could get was just about 2.5 months. And we set a goal and I took leave to go to Tonga with the family. And so this was a lean trip.
Now, explain your family.
My family, it's
Yes.
me and 6 children, my wife, who doesn't do much sailing.
And your youngest at that point was how young, and your oldest was how old?
So my youngest was 6 years old, and my oldest was 18, 19. And he didn't come with us to Tonga. He merely flew in because he was at university, and he flew in to sail back with us. The 5 children came on the trip, and off we went. And we actually had a wonderful time. The boat only had 400 litres of water, only 200 litres of diesel. We didn't have a water maker. We washed everything in salt water. Water on board was only for drinking. We carried most of our food, but it was a lean trip, lean trip. And financially, we were quite strapped, but we had a wonderful time. It was a great experience, and we made great friends, and we explored the 3 island groups. And my background is medicine. I'm an anaesthetist, but when I was a little boy, I did hand surgery, and I just happened to, while we're up in the northern group of islands, somebody damaged their hand, or their finger, actually trapped it in a hatch, and sought help from me, and I actually did a tendon repair and a whole lot of other things, and those are all part of the adventures, and as part of that gratitude, they actually helped supply us with water on a few places that they were at, because they had a water maker and we didn't. And I can tell you, there's the first lesson. You want a water maker when you go offshore. The groundwater in the islands, because it's coral, is foul. It tastes terrible. And tank water that you get is riddled with mosquitoes and other things. So, tough trip, but great adventure. And my eldest son flew into Tongatapu, which is the main island, and we set off for home, and we went by Minerva Reef, which we had stopped off on the way to Tonga. Now, Minerva Reef is just a little reef in the middle of the Pacific. You can anchor in 20 meters of water. It's quite diabolical to be in the middle of the ocean and anchored, and it's quite a unique place. The weather's not good. And sailing south in the Pacific from the islands to New Zealand is a fraught trip. You have accurate weather for the first few days, but it's not bad weather in the islands that worries you. It's bad weather as you approach New Zealand. And that's an unknown entity because it's a week away. It's a week away from what's actually happening.
You are committed. It's not as if you can quickly just decide, yes, it looks like it's good, let's go, like you do with flying. You're committed because you're crossing the ocean.
You start, and in fact, one of the reasons why New Zealand doesn't have a refugee problem, because actually you don't make it. You are snookered by distance. It's a dangerous trip, and many incidents have happened on that trip. It's not for sissies, so to speak. But we'd had a good trip as we went down, and when we were about halfway to New Zealand, we hit bad weather, and we had big swells on a particular day, which I remember, 6-meter swells. Let me tell you something, 6-meter swells are just mind-boggling. And it feels like you're sailing down a mountain and up a mountain, so down into the valley. The valley is so deep that the wind ceases to fill the sails, and then you come up the other side, But these were big ocean swells. They were intriguing rather than too scary. And then the next day we got swell from the opposite direction with increased wind speed, and we had this confused swell. Everybody was seasick on board. There was a bit of general misery, and so that my wife is bedbound, can't get up. I'm standing watches with the children. The eldest son is standing watch with the youngest son. The two middle children are standing watches together, and I'm standing watch with the youngest. And then also being responsible for each shift of the children. And they're all managing well. This is sailing, and the boat's on auto helm, and we have this confused sea with steep backed waves where the boat sometimes lifts up and is airborne and drops down. And we had a particularly bad one, and there was a huge crack, and the boat fell down, and everything seemed to be all right. But I had a look, and there was a crack along that repair that I told you about. Seemed to be okay. Everything was intact. We pressed
Was water coming in through the crack? But it was
water was not coming in. But we and that's the first error that I made. I should have actually pointed off and eased off on the boat, but there was a new bad weather system coming, which was worrying me, and we were beating to windward. It's unpleasant sailing like that, just unpleasant at sea. And we had another incident that evening. Big steep back wave, boat completely airborne, an enormous crash, and the whole sides of the boat folded in, smashed the forward bulkhead, folded in, and the rigging, which never broke, by the way, but the rigging just became loose because the whole boat folded in, and it just fell down along the side of the boat. The mast broke in three places. The boom collapsed, nearly crushing Tom, my youngest son, who still suffers some post-traumatic stress over that incident, actually, to this day. So not only did the forward bulkhead break, but it pushed all the saloon seating back 2 or 3 inches, and a full-blown crack over the keel stub where this repair had done appeared. No water. We had done drills with the kids. We had prepared them with life raft drills. We knew what to do if the rigging collapses, and basically every boatie who goes to sea knows that you immediately free the rig. If your mast collapses and you break a stay and the mast falls over, the mast becomes a battering ram and smashes a hole through the side of the boat. You get out the bolt cutters, or even easier, you pull out the clevis pins from the rigging, the split pins from the clevis pins on the rigging, and you knock the clevis pins out and you free the rigging, leaving just the forestay intact. That's what you do. We were going to free the rigging, but I noticed that the rigging was trapped, and because all the internal lines in the mast were intact, all I had to do was to tighten up the halyards, and the mast and sails were trapped with the keel, and the boat hove to beautifully. We were comfortable, and it all looked good, actually. So we took our time to do an assessment and to see how we could jury rig the boat. We were 350 nautical miles away from New Zealand. I did not have enough diesel to motor, so we would have had to rig up some emergency rigging. And I ran through all the scenarios in my head as to what might happen. And I realized actually that we had a good chance of this keel now completely snapping off with this crack, because the boat hull was now unstable. My youngest child had an automatic inflating life jacket, and I couldn't get it out of my head that if there was another incident and we broke that keel off, that the boat would turn upside down and at least one, if not more, of my children would drown. And so I spoke to them. I said, listen, we actually can't. It's the first time in my life where I can't save ourselves. We're actually going to have to look for help. Matthew asked if he could set up the EPIRB, which is we set off. Of course, you pull the little pin and put it at the back of the vessel.
Yeah.
Float it in the water, actually. It runs on a little halyard. We had a satellite phone. 3 minutes of call left, prepaid, on a satellite phone. Can't top it up at sea. And so we made a call. So I'm going to ask you a question. Who would you call if you had 3 minutes left on a satellite phone? So we decided to phone the New Zealand Rescue Coordination Centre, which we had a little book of numbers and all sorts of things. And so we gave them a ring. Now, I kid you not, Andrew, we got a voice message that said, "This number has changed. Please ring." And there was another number, which we wrote down. And even though we were only on the phone for about 15 seconds, the satellite phone docks a minute off your time. Now we've got 2 minutes left. So we phone the second number. And there's a recorded message. And it says, "You have reached the Rescue Coordination Centre after hours. Please leave a message."
No.
Oh, so phone down. 1 minute left. Who do we phone now?
Did you not leave them a message giving your coordinates?
I was completely stunned. and it was just shocking. I'd got Matthew to make the next call, which we phoned Taupo Maritime Radio Control Room. And when we phoned them, and I've listened to the recording of that because they record all their calls, Matthew says, we're a family out at sea, and they say, "We've got your EPIRB. We've got your EPIRB." And then I'd said to Matthew, "Explain to them that we've only got a minute left of calls. Can they try and ring us back on a satellite phone?" And they said, "Can you establish SSB contact?" So we put the phone down, and the mast is under the water.
I was going to say, your antenna is yes.
Underneath, not on top.
Mm.
Now, actually, I'm a radio amateur, so I had pre-thought this out. So, and most boaties will understand that when you plan an offshore trip, not only do you prepare your boat to the very best of your ability, you also have plans. You have wood and shutters in case you break a window. And one of the plans I had was what to do if I lost the mast and I needed to make the SSB work. So what I did was I put a fishing rod up at the front of the boat, and I ran a electrical wire from the front of the boat to the back of the boat, and then down to the connector for the SSB. And we sent out a Mayday call. And that Mayday was picked up by a Coast Guard station in Hobart, Australia. They picked up the Mayday call. It was, and clear, you cannot believe how loud the signal was. In ham terms, it's what we call armchair copy.
Wow.
I'm talking to you
so
now.
Your antenna, your jury-rigged antenna worked a storm.
It did work a storm, and it was the subject of an article that was written about emergency antennas as part of this incident, and it worked unbelievably well. And they relayed signals back to New Zealand, and where they asked what my intentions were, and I said, we're unable to rescue ourselves. We have a boat that can't be sailed, and for the sake of the family, we need to abandon the vessel. So they said that they would work on it and to remain on channel. And so that was about 5 o'clock in the evening, 5:30. And around about 9 o'clock at night, a C-130 aircraft from the New Zealand Air Force came over. And they made contact with us before we even saw the aircraft. They made contact on VHF, channel 16, and they asked if we were right. Matthew said, because Matthew's gung-ho with everything, could he set off a flare? And they said, yes, you could set off a flare, an orange flare. So we got the flares out, and off we set was this flare, holding it with a tea towel because sometimes it gets hot. And there's this roar. Now it's pitch dark now. There's this roar, and it's pitch black. There's not a bit of light. And what we've actually set off is a smoke flare and not the orange flare. And there's the next lesson. is that actually all the flares are the same size. I can't see anything without glasses, and I could not read the fine print to know which flare was which. And so now in the life raft, I have a set of glasses so that when I eventually get in the life raft, that I can actually read what I need to read, because actually I can't see enough. And so that's another lesson. You need to look at your flares and maybe write on them so you know what they are, because they look all identical, and you've got smoke flares and orange flares and white flares, and they look the same. So we had a little chuckle about that. That was kind of funny, light relief at how stupid we felt about setting off a flare that did nothing. They could see us on their radar. They asked if we needed food, life raft, radio equipment, which we didn't, and they then said that they would remain in the sky until a vessel had arrived. So I was still in SSB contact with Hobart and New Zealand, and I heard that they had tried a number of vessels, and in fact, there are other sub stories to this. There was a Auckland to Fiji yacht race. Some of the race boats had heard about this accident and were prepared to deviate off course to help us. There was a container ship, and lucky for us, there was also a French Navy warship who were only 4 hours away. And they had been caught in the same bad system that we and had abandoned their maneuvers. And they were coming to Auckland. And so they said that they would come and help us. So the C-130 aircraft remains circling overhead. It's a weird feeling, Andrew. This being sitting on the deck of this boat, now hove to, and now actually rather comfortable because we're hove to. We're no longer beating to windward with this aeroplane circling overhead, a bit like a vulture over a dead carcass. It was weird. It was just but kind of comforting. But
Yeah.
they're not actually able to help you. It's weird. They're there. You can talk to them on the VHF. They're encouraging you, checking that you're all right, but they can't land and they can't pick you up, but they're looking out for you.
It reminds me of something that happened just a couple of weeks ago. I was doing a solo trip and I was very remote. And I was sitting back, it was dark, and I saw the space station. And I thought to myself, the closest humans to me right now are in the space station. They're
Yeah.
actually about 200 or so miles from me, closer than anybody else. But if I had a problem, they're not going to be able to help me.
Uh,
You know,
they
it
could
was
talk
kind
to you
of
on the
weird,
radio.
actually.
That's it.
Yeah.
Quite right.
Mm.
So that's what happened. And then when the French Navy ship arrived, we said goodbye to the aircraft, and I got in contact with the captain of the ship, who was an absolute gentleman, Numa Dubek, and he asked about the boat and the conditions and about effecting a rescue. And I described the conditions, and he said to me, these were his words: "For the sake of your crew and mine, if you're prepared to wait until morning, it will be safer. The sea would have settled, and it would be safer in daylight hours." So I explained to him that we were worried that the keel was going to break off. And so what we agreed was that we would close hatches, we'd remain below, and we'd stay in VHF contact. And they would circle us through the night around the boat, at a distance, of course, and not too close, to keep commercial shipping off the vessel. And that's what they did. And we had some other experiences which are worth mentioning. I had prepared my family to get into the life raft. Now, my daughter, who was six, the youngest one, when we did the life raft drills in a wave pool, she completely freaked out. And we had told her, "Don't worry, sweetheart, we won't ever have to be in a life raft." But we told them now that this was a possibility. And I remember she said something that just cut me to the quick. She said, when I told her about the life raft, she said, "You've ruined my life, Dad." And I thought, I may well have, because we might not survive this. We had a little spiritual experience as we knelt as a family and said prayers. And I tell you what, from a spiritual point of view, when you're in dire straits, your prayers are very different. And we had an overwhelming feeling of peace without knowing what the outcome would be. It was actually very nice. as a family, and I share that for those with religious beliefs. And then we spent a miserable night listening to our boat creak and whine through the night as we lay a hull, which is really what we were doing, until morning.
Lay a hull, that
Lay a
expression.
hull. In other words, you don't have sails up; you're just lying on the boat.
Right.
So, except we had sails underneath that were working like a boat anchor, but it's effectively called lying a hull.
Right.
You're just in the boat, bobbing in the sea. And we were up bright and early, packed with a little backpack each for the children, ready to evacuate the boat. And the most amazing sight greeted my eyes. We saw the French Navy warship disappear over the horizon, smoke pouring out of her funnels, black pouring out, and she just disappeared over the horizon. And I thought, oh my goodness, here's a language problem. Clearly, did I say something that offended the French? I wasn't expecting that. We were expecting that we would now maneuver into rescue mode. And so I got on the radio. I was very polite and asked if I had misunderstood. Anyway, what had happened was that during the night, the slow movement of the boat around us, their engines had coked up, and they needed to decoke the engines, get rid of the carbon buildups. She's an old boat, and to actually effect a rescue. So they arrived back in about an hour, a nerve-wracking hour, because they disappeared over the horizon, and they returned, and they sent a SWAT team on a Zodiac. So French naval marines in their SWAT gear, looking military stuff,
Very professional.
and they were professional. They arrived on board. They took Joy and the younger three children. They loaded up in the Zodiac and they went up to the warship. And of course, they merely put cargo net down the side of the warship, and you've got to climb up. They timed and then the kids. And I've got to tell you that fear lends you wings. Hey? It doesn't matter how tired you are, or whatever. Those kids were up and into the hands of nice French sailors who picked them up as they came on board. And then they came and picked up the next two children, and they left me on the boat on my own. And then they came along. Two engineers were in that vessel, came on board, and I showed them what was happening. I said, look, can you help me? Is there a chance we could tow this vessel? And they had a look and they said, no, the boat will break up. It's already too damaged and it's not towable. But you will need to scuttle the vessel. I said, no, I'm just going to leave it. I will come back with friends and try and pick up the vessel. And they said, no, the Maritime Safety Authority has insisted that this vessel is a danger to shipping. It's in a commercial shipping area, needs to be scuttled. So you need to put anything that can float inside and scuttle the boat. So I said, well, you can do what you like, but I don't want to. And they said, no, you don't understand. We're French and we don't sink New Zealand boats. And that was a reference to the Rainbow Warrior. It's quite interesting. I thought, oh, wow, you don't sink New Zealand boats. I, of course, didn't say anything. And then they took out a waterproof video camera and videoed me sinking my own boat. It was the most traumatic thing I've done, taking an axe and breaking all the piping of all the stopcocks, etc., that lead into the boat, and each one would switch on a water jet like a fire hydrant in the boat. And that was a very traumatic event, actually. And then they did something that was interesting. They said, we will leave you alone with your boat until you signal us to pick you up so you can spend some time with your boat. And I sat and cried, Andrew. I sat in the cockpit of the boat, just watching my boat fill with water. Quiet moment, took the New Zealand flag down, signaled to them, and they picked me up. And there are some pictures on the internet somewhere. I've seen them with the boat just about to sink. And so that was quite a traumatic thing. And we were taken out to the boat, the warship, and I climbed up the the cargo netting. Very pleased to see my family and be introduced to the Captain Durbeck, or Commander Durbeck. He took us to the wardroom where the rest of the family were. We were all in clothes. We hadn't showered or changed for 4 or 5 days. Probably a bit smelly, actually. And what the crew had done was they had all organized they'd sized uniforms for each of us, and a towel and soap and what have you. And we were given showers, etc. We changed into French uniform. And you'll see those pictures, which I sent you, are us all wearing French Navy uniform because we had no clothes. So we watched the kind of remaining of our boat just before it sank. We didn't quite watch the final bubbles. And then we steamed off to Auckland with the weather improving and starting to look quite fantastic. The commanding officer gave me a run of the vessel, asked if I wanted to stand a watch. I said I'd love to stand a watch, so I did. I chose the morning watch as we were coming into Auckland to stand. We were treated to the most amazing French cooking on board. Joshua actually was the cook who I later met this year when I actually paid a visit to that warship for the last time. The trip into Auckland was lovely. It was smooth waters and we're traveling at about 20 knots. And then the captain said to me, we're just going to pick up the pilot and the New Zealand naval attache, which they did. And the naval attache arrived on board in full ceremonial dress, ceremonial sword. It's part of the protocol with visiting foreign navy that our naval attache comes on board to welcome them. And she specifically asked to talk to me, which I was quite surprised. We had made some phone calls back. We'd arranged somebody to pick us up. We said, don't tell anybody. We just want to go home. The kids want to have a McDonald's and go home, and we want to just go home and lick our wounds. And the French, sorry, not the French, the New Zealand attache said, look, while you've been gone, things have happened. Michael Jackson's died. Oh, dear, we've been away. And then she explained to me about a unique situation in New Zealand. We'd had the French rugby team out here. And of course, anybody who plays rugby is a rival for New Zealand. And one of their players had got beaten up ostensibly by some of our supporters. Our Prime Minister took out a page advert in the New Zealand Herald and made a public apology to the French people for this incident. And then it turns out that actually that French player was beaten up by his own guys over a woman. And our newspapers went riot about how horrible the French were. And the French Prime Minister took out an advert and made a public apology to New Zealand for this incident. It's quite amazing. And the press had got to hear this and had decided that now the French had redeemed themselves for saving a New Zealand family. So that was, 2 adults and 6 children. And the naval attache said, now look, we've managed to banish them from the water. So you'll have an easy trip in. But the moment you step off this warship, I'm afraid there'll be camera crews, etc. And we can try and usher you into a vehicle and get you away if you like. I spoke to the family and I said, we've been rescued on the public purse. And there's nothing that cheeses public off more when you don't front up when they have spent the money on something on your behalf. I said, so we are just going to wear this. We will front up and we'll just wear it as it comes. And there was a huge press contingent when we arrived in, waiting on the wharf. It's a public wharf where that warship pulled in. They had boom mics. They picked up on all sorts of private and personal conversations. And in fact, those 2 pictures that you've got were in fact press pictures that I've showed you. In fact, those 4 pictures that you've got are from newspaper articles. I clearly didn't take any pictures. So that was an interesting experience. And then we had 24 hours of invasive news. And then we weren't interesting anymore. It was quite interesting, sort of
I,
intense stuff. And then
we
nothing.
got we were in South Africa and we got a news clip. We had heard about something, so we I don't think it was it wasn't a surprise to us, but because we'd heard vaguely what had happened, and then there was a story about Agnes, your sister, and
Yeah,
they were saying that the kids had expressed an interest in going home and having some of her lasagna,
yeah.
and that was like this the most biggest like headlines
It had
lasagna
been
for
picked
you
up
know
by a boom mic that had been
right.
linked over, and and little Abby had said how she was looking forward to having some of Agnes's lasagna. Yeah, and so that's the, if you like, culmination of of the adventure. But other things happened that are worth mentioning. So
Hmm.
going back to the damage with the keel, we eventually bought a second boat, and of course, damage was picked up, and that needed to be repaired under the old owner's insurance. And this time, I employed the services of a surveyor who surveyed every step and insisted that when they had exposed where the damage was, that it hadn't, that the damage was much more than had actually been notified, and more meetings with the insurance, etc. And that cost of that repair was about 4 times the original estimate. It ended up with a whole lot of legal stuff, etc. And so one of the big learnings that I had was, you need a repair, you get your own surveyor in to challenge the insurance company. Your life depends on that boat. Do not accept. The insurance agents are not interested in your life. They're not interested in your safety. They want to spend as little as possible. And so you need to get a surveyor to help you with that repair. Don't accept anything else. Now, of course, you're not the expert. You're just the owner. You know nothing. Nobody takes your word for it. But a marine surveyor carries sway in the industry. And when he says that's not safe, it's not safe. Ain't a problem. And he says if the repair's not adequate, it's not adequate. And so that's my lesson, which I should have learnt in the beginning. I can't say that what happened to the boat is really because of that incident, but it's suspiciously so. And had I been wise and put a surveyor on the job, I don't know that I would have been in that position. And so there's a big lesson for me. I flew down to Wellington. I got to meet the people from the Rescue Coordination Centre and personally thank them. I met the people who'd been on shift at the time. I spoke to them about our experience and what have you. I wrote a report for them, which they published for their internal stuff. While I was doing that, my family went to Whenuapai, which is here in Auckland, to meet the pilot and the crew who had flown the aircraft out and to thank them. Of course, each time that you do these kind of things, of course, you're treated royally, and they were taken on board the aircraft and shown around and what have you. And so we had lots of good experiences. The the downside, of course, is that you become defined by events like this. I used to be on various chat forums. The negative sentiments expressed in the various chat forums about me abandoning a vessel for a broken mast, which is how it had been reported in the news, and all the armchair critics came on board. It was quite amazing. It was so hurtful and so upsetting that I deleted all those accounts. I've never been on any of the marine chat forums again, and I'm quite suspicious of social media because of it. It was just at the wrong time. I was suffering, self-doubt and a bit of depression around this, and you know, in retrospect, Andrew, did I make the right call? I made the right call because I still have 6 children, and that is the main thing. It's hard to be a skipper, and it's hard to make good calls. A good call from a skipper, first one is to know when not to go sailing, and then, of course, the second one is to know how to put your crew first and their safety being paramount. And so maybe I could have pointed off. I should have been more careful about how that repair on the boat was done. That was naive on my part. I made a good call in deciding not to risk the lives of the children. Fortunately for me, the two engineers from the warship had got on board and actually issued a report and an opinion on the safety of the vessel and which was helpful from an insurance point of view. We lost quite a bit of money on that, but not all, and so was enough to put a substantial amount on yet another boat. So here, a stupid thing you do is buy a boat. That's what I call economic suicide.
Okay.
And then having lost a boat and lost a lot of money because nobody pays you for all the equipment that you put on board. It's just a boat from the insurance point of view. You put thousands of dollars in, you repair all the sails and all the spares that you put on board. You go completely nuts over it. And then to get a second boat. And I thought long and hard about this. I just didn't want a incident like this to define sailing for the family. I didn't want this to terminate it, that we have an incident and then we never go sailing again. So I did get another boat. And I was nervous about whether I would ever have the courage to go offshore again. And this other boat, slightly bigger, a 45-footer, New Zealand built, described the repairs that have been done. Matthew and I raced it in the two-handed, and I think as part of the intro, I did discuss that from the last.
Previous,
Yeah.
yes.
So we raced that two-handed around New Zealand, and then that gave me the confidence to say, yes, you actually are a competent skipper, and yes, the boat is well found, and yes, we will undertake another adventure. And we then sailed to Vanuatu, and then across to Namur, and then explored New Caledonia, and then subsequently we've been to Fiji, and I've been around New Zealand again, and I've been down to the Chatham Islands, and I've been down to the Auckland Islands, which are sub-Antarctic islands. So I've done quite a number of adventures, and so that second boat we've done about 32,000 nautical miles in.
So your family didn't discourage them from going sailing with you?
No, they had a bit of trauma, and so Tom, for many years afterwards, if a boat heeled over too much, he would get nervous, and he did suffer a bit. And so, quite interestingly, actually, we had one of the New Zealand TV companies wanted to do a program on shipwrecks, and asked if they could do a pilot program on our incident, which I said yes. And they came through with cameras and interviewed the family. And that's when I realized that actually there's still deep trauma that my family feel around this. There were tears as they recounted the stories. Each one of them personally faced the prospect of dying. There were interesting things. One of the children made a statement that's, was, we didn't know that Dad would give up his boat for our lives. It's quite interesting. So that was for them. They saw me making this decision. No, it's not safe. We're going to abandon the vessel. And that's a big thing. And I didn't know it was a big thing. It was just a decision that I made. It was a big standout point because Dad never gives up on anything. And so that was quite interesting. And I was interested listening to their stories because you tend to, as a parent, interfere when your children are telling a story. You fill in the facts. But I remained silent as they were interviewed, and got a new perspective and understood about the trauma that each child in a different way experienced on that trip, and realized they've all had to deal with those demons. And so the decision to get another boat and to go back to sea and make sailing still an adventure, I think was a good call. Financially, the worst call of my life to, have another boat. I can tell you that financially you don't want to do that, Andrew. It's
But it
not
makes
at all.
sense to me that it settled old ghosts. The
Yes,
fact that your family did get back together on another boat and did some more adventures
yes.
has to have been positive.
Oh, positive, but not cheap. Positive, but
No, not cheap. No.
um,
Uh,
and I told you that as part of this culmination of things, we kept up contact with the crew. I'd been to Paris to visit Numa. He helped me sell my boat. crewed for me from Vanuatu to New Caledonia. He said, "Let me show you my Numia." Incidentally, by the way, when that warship picked us up, they've got a crew of 30. 15 of the sailors were confined to their berths because of seasickness. It does tell you how bad the conditions were when seasoned Navy people are flat on their berths, can't actually cope. So that we were not in nice conditions, I have to admit. And so, and never did the commanding officer of that vessel ever doubt my word or my assessment. And, he paid me the ultimate privilege by being crew on a boat that I sailed. He's not a yachtsman. He's a Navy person, so he's not a sailor from that point of view. And it was really an amazing mark of respect doing that. And then,
Huge to me. That's in itself is astonishing that he would want to come and sail with you. It's amazing. It's an amazing end to the story.
Yeah. Well, in fact, the real end to the story has been invited on the very last trip that the Glorious, which is the name of the warship.
Retell us that story. I know you told it before, but retell us that story.
So I got an email that invited me in May, actually, to attend the last trip that the warship was going to do before being decommissioned. It's a class, I think they P500s, I think is the class. They're last of a kind for the French Navy. This was the last vessel to be decommissioned. All their boats are twice as big. So it's actually quite a small vessel as French Navy boats go. And so it's a French Navy tradition to go on one last patrol and to invite the old commanding officers on board. So they were invited, and they invited me as a guest of honor to come with them. And Numa flew in from Paris and joined me on that boat. And that was quite a cool thing. And I've got some video material of that, which is just to remind the kids of it's noisy and there's nothing nice about being on a warship, frankly. It's not built for comfort. It was actually all the old memories came flooding back, kind of relived some of those things. And it kind of closed a chapter. And the great irony is that the cook, the chef on this year in May, was the same one that was on board when we were rescued in 2009. So he was the only crew member who's the same. And he remembered us, and I had a good chat to him, and he still cooked magnificent food, I got to tell you.
Fantastic. I bet you did. I bet.
So, yeah. It was.
You mentioned that the experience was your life in some ways has been defined by this experience. Can you share a little bit more with what you mean by that?
So it's interesting. When I came back, I picked up the job of being the head of department for our anesthetic department. We have anesthetic and operating rooms, so basically 900 staff, big enterprise, if you like, public hospital. Somebody put a notice on my door that said, "Don't sink this ship." Somebody gave me a captain's hat, which they put on my door. Somebody put a picture on the door of a old sailor with a captain's hat. So and in fact, the whole hospital had got to hear about it. There was a senior meeting that is taking place at the time that the news broke, and so all these senior people in the hospital knew about me, and so I went from being relatively anonymous in a hospital to incredibly well known, but not because I'm a brilliant anaesthetist, because of this event. There was a little interesting thing, when the news breaks about something, of course, where does the news media go? They go to the internet to look for information. And I'll relate just a little story, which is one of the members of the department, I'd asked her to put a little bio together for every member of the department on something which is called Health Point, which is just a little bio on all doctors. She really didn't want to do it. And so she sneaked in. It's deep down in the internet. You couldn't find it if you tried. But she slipped in a little Easter egg, and that is published in the main press, actually, that it says Dr. Charles Bradfield is an anaesthetist and his interests are neuroanesthesia and sailing, and making babies. What it said on the bio. Um, and that was Laura who did that. She was very embarrassed, actually, and because nobody thought it was a joke, a private joke, something that she
Yes.
did, to take the Michael out of me. Didn't think that would end up on national press,
National
published both
news.
in New Zealand and overseas, actually. And I got communication from all around the world. Lots of people were aware of actually what happened, sent their thoughts and prayers. It was quite amazing. Um, my sister's recollection of the incident is I left her as a next of kin with the EPIRB had been activated. She describes being phoned by the Rescue Coordination Centre. She thought they were collecting money. They were polite and nice to her. And they said, well, do you know Charles Bradfield? Yes, he's my brother. He said, well, we've just had an EPIRB activation from the Pacific. And they kept her informed, actually, every step of the way so that she was not too nervous. So lots of little incidents. And I still meet people today who have heard about the incident. And it, as I said, I don't really want to say it defines you. It's a major event in your life. It's been a major event for us. I've done a lot of personal growth because of it. There's a spiritual element to it, which, I'm subject of a talk at church about faith and what have you. A example of self preparedness, of being prepared, because actually we were prepared for that trip. We had preempted, pre-thought, pre-planned for things that might happen. So all those things are they're little sub-stories in their own right. But a wonderful adventure, Headline news in the New Zealand Herald was homework at the bottom of the sea, because somebody had overheard my daughter, with his boom mic, telling so, oh, well, all the work, because they took schoolwork to do, which they were going to hand in because they were away from school. And of course, that all sunk with the boat. And little stories from school when going back to school afterwards, and the teacher saying, yeah, I know your homework's.
Yeah, instead of my puppy dog ate my homework. This time my homework is in the bottom of the Pacific.
Yeah.
It's a little bit more believable actually than
And,
the puppy story.
And we're very close as a family with the kids. This is a big bonding moment, this life-threatening moment that we've lived through, and so we actually are very close. It's nice that they've been prepared to go sailing with their father. Not one of them has actually refused, and they've gone offshore with me again. And my daughters are keen sailors, and my middle daughter plays the guitar. She's just wonderful. You'll see the picture. She's the cheeky one. You'll see that's little Abby. Plays the guitar beautifully. I love it, having her at sea, sailing the tropics at night in the warm tropical breeze with her sitting at the back of the boat playing music. That's just magic. Those are magical moments that are just,
To me, that is the sign of the success of the whole story. Is because the naysayers will point fingers, and I can't stand judgmental social media keyboard warriors, and I have to deal with them all the time. But that, to me, the fact that your kids still go sailing with you, go sailing on their own, still love the sport, and you are close family enough to go on a trip and play the guitar in the tropics. To me, that's a success. That is a success story.
Yeah. This trip that we
is.
went to Fiji on, which we did during COVID, by the way, Joy and I planned to go, and it was just going to be us. And then my eldest son heard about this and said, oh, well, stuff it. You're not going on your own. I want to be with you. Resigned from his job. He was working in Paris at the time, flew over. Matthew and his partner, they both said, oh, man, Fiji. They resigned from their jobs and flew over. And so, in fact, there was 5 of us on board, and we remained and sailed and explored Fiji for 5 months. And had a wonderful time, an absolute wonderful time. So many other experiences which are not subject of this podcast, but I think those are all the learnings that I really wanted to share Because good adventures, there's learnings over it. Hopefully there's a few people that might benefit from some of the things I've learned, painfully so.
Well, yeah. Well, now I'm definitely not buying a boat. I remember what was about 2 years ago, I actually chatted to you briefly and I said, look, I've got a choice, boat, aeroplane. And I remember you saying to me, aeroplane.
You
And I
really
did.
need to sail more than 30 days a year to warrant
Yes.
owning a boat.
Yes.
And you've got to be committed. And I'm one of
Yes.
the few people I know who really is packing in the miles. I'm still full-time employed. So, if you think about it, over the 14 years that I've owned the boat and I've managed to clock over 32,000 nautical miles, we have packed in the sailing. I'm not retired. I'm fully employed. And that's just done with leave and a little bit of unpaid leave going to Fiji. But, yeah.
Fantastic. Wonderful story, Charles. Thank you so much for your time and sharing this with us. It's been hugely enjoyable. And Gwyn has been asking me almost every day. She listened to our first podcast, and I was watching her listen, and she just kept on laughing and giggling and laughing and giggling. And she keeps asking me, when are you doing, Charles? When are you doing? And I just told her today, and she said, fantastic. I'm going to see it before anybody else. Forget about waiting for it to be posted on. I want to watch it.
Oh, that's very nice. It is very nice.
So fantastic. Thank you again.
You're welcome. You're welcome. It's interesting. I don't actually talk about this often because it makes me emotional. There's deep-seated emotion. I have to fight back tears and emotion.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah, I
probably
can
one of the
see
most emotional experiences.
I can see that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Fantastic. So all we have to do now before we wrap up is arrange for me to come down to Auckland and do some sailing with you, even if it's a weekend.
I would love you to do that, actually. It would be fantastic. I've just done some work on the boat. We intend to keep it for the next 10 years. We're not in a hurry to get rid of it.
Okay.
And so I put a lot of effort into refurbishing. She's just had her hull painted, deck replaced, new lease of life. We're looking forward to more adventures.
And that is mainly why you're not retired.
That's why I'm not retired. Pay for the boat. There's the key. I could retire tomorrow if I sold the boat, but then I wouldn't want to retire. You know what I mean? Because then what am I going to do?
Yeah, absolutely right.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you again, Charles.
Okay, you're most welcome.
Thank you so much for listening to the Next Adventure podcast with me, Andrew St. Pierre White. To find out more information, check out thenextjourney.net. Join us each Sunday